begin to quote your titles, Gus. Peter Farmer, who was if you like, the first the 70 plus guys that started to come through. US College, gold medalist, followed by Sean Carlin, moving up a little bit further, developed, and then Stuart Brendel. They're all linked in various ways. Stuart Brendel is the current national record holder. They're all a bit linked in various ways, and I just think it's fantastic for Tassie to have been able to get these four guys together, even if it's a fairly short-term thing. But I think it's wonderful. So, welcome to everyone.
The other point is that we're all retired. That's the other link.
I heard that he threw yesterday.
Demonstrated.
Demonstrated, there you go. So.
We'll have a chance to have it back, you and I. We do about every 10 years or something together.
So, guys, I guess what we wanted to talk about here is setting up a network, a national network in hammer throwing, in the absence of a high performance centre for throws or even for hammer throwing, and just shooting some ideas, your sort of ideas of how we might go about that. And maybe if Stu, you want to lead off.
First thing that pops in my head is communication. Communication is the key. I know myself, when I was throwing, through the ranks, it's all about exposure and communication, talking to a variety of people. It wasn't just a case of reading a textbook and training with a particular person. It was about being exposed to as many different models, technical models as you possibly could. In doing that, you actually wean out what is important for you and your body type and the way you're training, your belief systems, etc. And early on, I did some work with some of the Germans. Realised that wasn't working for me because the technical model, the basis of the technical model was a little bit different. It wasn't until sort of looking with the Hungarians that it was a bit more down my sort of way of thinking. And yeah, like I said, communication's the key. I know early on in my career, and I tell everyone to do something like this: jump on the phone, ring people. One day I decided I didn't know Peter Farmer at all. I'd heard of him, I'd seen him on the rankings list, and that was about it. I had no contact, and I just
except when you were 12. You were when you were at the AIS in 1984.
He's got a better memory than me.
That's what happens when you get older.
Yeah, but I ranked Peter up. I thought, I think on that rankings list that year, I threw 75-90, which was Peter's best. We were level pegging, and that was the sort of stimulus to give him a call. I rang him up, and we started a relationship, and for a while there, Peter was actually coaching me. So that's one thing I'll say to you guys. If you're talking about having a network, get on the phone, start ringing people. You've got people in Australia, bring people overseas, keep in touch with them. So that's probably the major bit of advice I'd give. Nothing about them. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me?
You're wonderful. Even though you did break my record, but you still think you're wonderful. Look, there's lots of similarities, I guess, in what we've all done. And I think one of the interesting things, like later on, when I'm going to talk about training for a 75 plus thrower, one of the things that there is having mentors. And I know that, both Peter and Gus. Peter came to Adelaide once, and I remember working with him in Canberra. When I was getting ready for Atlanta, Peter came to where we were training and did a session with me. So there was things like that can make a difference. And Gus, being closer to home, was always very, very helpful to myself and to my brother and to Peter Brebner, who was my throwing coach. So having people around who you can talk to, as Stuart said, is really critical. And because you just don't know everything. And even when you've been doing stuff for a long time, there is still things. As Tim was saying, he's got a few things to work on. I said, well, once you haven't, you're probably time to stop. And I don't think there's ever a time when there's something that you weren't getting right. I can't remember having a perfect throw. There was always something that could have been better. I think the other thing that's probably common with all of us is that we had international exposure. So working with people from different countries and getting good advice. And it's interesting, I was just thinking this week when I was thinking about, well, what am I going to talk about? I know I did like training with the Germans, and I think it is a different model. It was very technical. There was a lot of body position work. Whereas I think when I listened to Stuart, and Stuart and I seemingly would know each other better in terms of our throwing stuff, but we probably didn't. It was a weird sort of relationship because I knew Stewie again for a while, and he was doing discus and so on. Then he started doing hammer, and our paths crossed occasionally.
I've never been him.
Yeah, well, that's good. And he did go close to me, I'll tell you a couple of
6
times.
centimetres.
I remember thinking, shit, I was bloody young whippersnapper. But anyway, that was fun. That's good fun in a sense, especially after it doesn't happen. But I got out at the right time, I know that. Because after I decided to get out, it wasn't long before Stuart started throwing a lot further than what I was throwing. But having that international, and I know like Stuart talks about like orbit and hammer position, and it's a different type of concept, and so it's interesting when you grow up with your philosophies and you have your base sort of model and how you think about the event, and then you're listening to other people, it's hard to change. Well, how does that fit into what I was doing? You've always got to ground it back to what you know. But getting that experience, you can say, well, hang on, how can that make me a better thrower? So I was still throwing now, and I've been exposed to Stuart and what he was doing. And his ideas, you take that away and say, well, how can that make me a better thrower? So I think what we're doing now, and what's happening now, and you guys, thank you for putting this all together, because it is the beginning of that network. So I think you're already established that in a sense. I remember as a young athlete going up to Canberra, we used to have some training camps up there, mostly in January, and they were just fantastic. We would train together for a week, and guys that, again, you never knew that well, but you would after that week. You'd be, being a younger guy back then, going out and training with even people like Hans Knox was an experience in itself.
This has been paint.
I know, I love him, don't get me wrong. I mean, Hans is a different guy, and he's had a big impact on throwing in Australia, but so again, and Gus and people like Joe Quigley and people like Peter Baxavan and Bill Spivey, I mean, it was just fantastic to have a bunch of hammer throwers and coaches together for a week. And yes, we had a great time, but we did a lot of good training, and you'd come away from there, and often the performances after that, the next couple of weeks were really good. So I know getting together and actually getting over that sort of, because it is a competition, we're in competition, aren't we, often? But getting over that and actually saying, well, actually, we can work together makes a big difference.
Hey, the baton has been passed. I would echo Stuart's comment about communication. One of the things that we have availability is the net, and number one is getting everybody's contact details. Anybody who has a remote interest in throwing, specifically hammer throwing, but having those contact details available. So Stuart used to have these interesting calls in the middle of the night or at other times, but I think it provides you with the opportunity to connect to other people, and not only the communication that way, if it's on the net, if it's available, but the whole idea about the material that was done this week, it's up on the net, it's published, so if you're a tree in the forest and you fall and nobody sees you, nobody hears you, do you exist? I think that's really important. The other part is the training camps. I've already suggested to you guys, or the people, I'll give you guys a copy later on. I'm an academic, so I wrote a little paper, mainly to react to, people should react to things. Diversity of opinion is really important. But the whole idea about having a winter and summer training camp, and even having a winter championships like you do in Europe, in France, and in other places, they have the training camps. And the third thing I think is, I worked at the AIS, and no offense to those who work at the AIS, but to me it's still a white elephant for our sport. I think, Stuart, you were the last thrower who was officially at the AIS, yet it's still a track and field and athletics event, but they don't acknowledge it, and they've got all these facilities that nobody uses. But but I think that with a variety of places where they're, instead of just, instead of having one national centre, you can have something where it's dedicated for a training camp, that's fine. But the whole idea of having in each particular place, there may be, in Sydney, may have 3 or 4 groups, you may have a couple in the country, you may have a couple in Victoria, you have Launceston and here, but you have places where there might be some coaches who can be there, a lot of the time, and they will, if you build it, they will come. And I believe that's important. But I'll add one more thing. I think it's really hard. Where I'm just doing some coaching now with with 3 people actually, just for fun. I bring my equipment out. It would really be nice, just like it was in Germany, when I first came to Darmstadt, where Walter Schmidt was the world record holder. You went out, they had the circle, you went out behind the shed, and there was the box. And all the equipment was in the box. And if AAA wanted to really, Athletics Australia wanted to do something, provide a box of equipment, including wires, to all the people who might be out there coaching. Okay.
Thanks.
Or maybe even new cage. Yeah.
Gus?
Okay, 1966 thereabouts, an English teacher who had migrated, a PE teacher, Altona Nortec, taught me to throw the hammer. The hammer wasn't a hammer, he actually got a soccer ball, took the guts out of it, filled it up with sand, put a rope through it and a dowel, a bit of timber. And that's all we did. On the cricket pitch, we just did turns and turns and turns. And basically the key fundamental thing that I saw when I was watching all of this, a lot of you think it's the hammer, and all you're doing is concentrating on the hammer rather than your footwork. I looked at some of the turns that were going on in there, and a lot of you can't turn. The key fundamental thing that he taught me was turns, I'm just saying. So basically that was the start of my athletics, but I couldn't get any coaching here in Australia, so I decided to leave Australia in 1971, went to Bayer Leverkusen. Bayer Leverkusen for me was just absolutely perfect. I arrived 71, which is the year before the 72 Olympics. At Bayer Leverkusen, that club had 28 athletes in the Olympic team from the one club. The atmosphere at training, you could eat it. You could walk into at night time and it was there. Everybody was training for the Olympics. I was very happy to have a coach that was meticulous with his training. Ziggy Pellerberg, he trained Uwe Bayer, he was a left-hander, threw a world record 74.90 ratified, and Hansi Fasel was a 71-metre thrower. So my philosophies have been German orientated. I came back and I brought back with me, I believe, the first 8-kilo hammer ever in Australia.